Welcome to Laguna Podcast, an attempt at illustrating the lives from the Lower Laguna Madre. Today I sit down with a man whose crafts have reached many of us within the space, involving photography and apparel. A mindset like his should be employed throughout the entire space of creators and aficionados alike. This is my conversation with Brandon Fox. Ready?
Gotta get comfy.
So take your time, find it to wherever you can just have a conversation for a while.
Yeah.
And then, you can also move around. It's not going to capture audio of you moving around or anything unless you know what I mean?
Gotcha.
So these are really good microphones. They're carotid microphones. So basically the sweet spot you can imagine is like a big donut around the outside of the ring.
Okay.
So you that's kind of where you kind of can be, and you'll be fine. You'll see.
Gotcha. And so this is probably good right here. I can hear myself pretty well.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I can also edit your audio. I can make it bounce a little higher. So then that way it'll capture a little more of the highs and more of the mids. But
dude, that's something right there. That's cool.
Cool. Well, all right. We got Mr. Brandon in the chair, Brandon Fox. And before we get into it, I told you before, I had known of you for a while, mostly because of your photography and quite literally mostly because of your photography and Sea Level as well. But it's really awesome for me to actually finally be here because when I first started this project and I realized that I was actually going to involve other non-guides and stuff like that, I figured that I was going to eventually ask you. And so it's just really awesome for you to actually be here and be a part of this project and the stuff that I've showed you that we probably won't talk about right now. But yeah, with that being said, the way I like to get these started is just run me through the beginning, like your first memory through the outdoor or in the outdoors. And then probably let's go from there to when you first were introduced to a camera.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Kerrville, which is a small town in the hill country, about an hour northwest of San Antonio. My father was a big fisherman. So growing up, we would, hit up the rivers and the creeks, the upper Guad up there, catching bass and catfish and carp and whatever else we could catch. And my dad was a big fisherman, but he was always freshwater was always in the meantime before the next weather window to head down south to fish the coast. So, all my initial first memories of fishing are just running around the river, messing around with ultralights and whatnot. And then eventually light fly rods, 3 and 4 weights. And then, ever since I was probably 3 or 4, my dad started bringing me along on the saltwater trips whenever a window allowed. And we'd drive down there, sleep in the car on the beach somewhere. Didn't have a lot of money back then. And did a lot of jetty fishing in Port Aransas and South Padre. In the early days, it was, soaking bait on the bottom. And then we kind of graduated to lures. Then we graduated to throwing flies. And it's a lot has changed, but it's also a lot is still the same from those early days.
I think so. Yeah, I completely agree. And then from that point forward, I assume it must have been an interesting story to find your way towards a camera. I think a lot of guys always want to be the guy on the bow, and it takes a lot of confidence in you as a person to not want to do that. And actually, I wanted to say that because I know what it's. I think I know what it's like, but I just run me through what it was like to actually get into the actual photography side of things.
Yeah, well, going back to those early trips, we would, the night before heading out, we would go to Walmart or HEB or something and grab a whole bunch of disposable cameras, take those down. And of course, it's funny now, film is back and cool again, but that's where it really started. Just shooting whatever we'd catch, whatever birds I'd see down there, fish that my dad or myself would catch, boats, just anything. And it kind of gradually progressed from there. And, got my first DSLR, which was a Nikon D3200, I believe. Still have it in my attic somewhere. Haven't touched it in probably 10 years, but I can't throw it away. It's got some sentimental value to it. I'm a bit of a gearhead in both photography and fishing gear. As you can see, I got too much gear laying around here. But a few years had passed, and you gain more gear, and before long, I realized, kind of did the math in my head, like how much gear I had. And I was like, okay, I gotta figure out how to get some sort of return on my investment with all this gear here. So I started doing some beach shoots for families on the beach and whatnot. Just stuff here and there. Some real estate photography. I kept fishing as like the fun photography though. I never really did anything of value for like companies or anything. I mean, I do, some companies would send me some gear or some merch or something, and we would do some content campaigns, but I always kind of like veered away from that because I wanted that to be like my escape from work. I didn't want to combine the two. And I think to this day, it's still kind of like that. And I don't really have any plans to do so,
I found that so funny, especially because like, I knew you I've started following you as a fishing photographer.
Yeah, I don't know. It's all I post. And it's definitely where like my heart lies. I like to keep that as my one escape from work. I don't like feeling pressure when I'm out on the boat to satisfy a company or, this or that. And don't get me wrong, I do. And I provide some media for some companies, but it's always, it's not like a paid gig. It's more like here you go. I got this while I was out. This is cool. Here you go. Feel free to use it. You know what I mean? Which is probably an interesting take, but
super interesting.
But yeah, that's kind of my thing.
That's so interesting, just because the reason why I find it perplexing again is me when I actually spoke to Michaela. One of her biggest issues was that she wasn't a big fan of feeling pressured for a shoot. And at the same time, some of her best images were taken when she was in a more relaxed state.
Absolutely.
And I even in that episode, I talked a little bit about why everything is better relaxed. It's not really just photography. It's not just casting. It's not just, so yeah, it was one of those things where it's like, I can understand, but I just find it funny that like you basically like give it away pro bono, which it's interesting. I guess it speaks to your character for really wanting to keep it fully, business from pleasure, which I can totally respect.
Yeah. I mean, it's don't get me wrong, my mind might change at some point in the future, but as of now, I'm satisfied just doing it for the love of it,
Mm-hmm. And so earlier when I got here, you're telling me that you, even though again you don't have that as your gig, you still do feel, or you still at one point felt pressure to actually maintain this whole not persona, but maintain this whole title of I'm always going to be posting and stuff like that, which was kind of in a way making it a job for you.
In a way, yeah. And I think a lot of us at some point in our lives or our, quote unquote fishing careers kind of fall into that. And for me, it was probably, I don't know, I guess you could call it the early days of Instagram. It was like 2014 to like maybe 2020, pretty much up until COVID, where if I didn't post something on my Instagram feed, in a week, I would like the anxiety would hit. It's like, okay, I gotta do something, like I gotta put something out there. Not that anyone gave a damn or was like waiting for me, it was just to satisfy my own ego, I guess. I don't know. It was just, there was a pressure to always be like, oh yeah, that guy's on fish or that guy's out doing something cool, And nowadays, I mean, dude, I haven't posted, I post on my stories, from time to time pretty often, but I haven't done like an actual post in over a year. And there's a whole hard drive in that office over there that's just full of like just content that probably should be posted, probably should be seen or enjoyed by someone. But I just, I started doing it, or I guess appreciating it, doing the photography and capturing these scenes and what we encounter out there, and just keeping it to myself and my
close knit friends.
A small circle of friends and family. And I don't know, I think that just gives me a lot more satisfaction now than it did back when I was, I guess, early 20s.
Yeah, I mean, I can feel that. I mean, what's like, in a way, it's like, well, what does it matter what someone who's on the other side of the globe thinks about what you're doing versus the people who actually matter in your life? So I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, for sure. And don't get me wrong, like there's nothing wrong with that. Like there's nothing wrong with posting all the time. I'm just talking about for my own personal opinion here, speaking to myself only. That's just kind of where I'm at. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like to throw things up on the story every now and then to let people know I'm still alive. But I guess it takes something big to make it as a standalone post now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I like to hope so. Now, just to do a quick backtrack, when did you finally realize that you were actually getting, good, or not notable in the social media world, but to yourself as a photographer, like looking at your own art and criticizing it? Because typically the person who makes the art is the harshest critic. When did you realize that you were, actually appeasing yourself and feeling like you were getting good, or feeling like you knew what you were doing, you felt confident with that part of your career, that part of your art?
I guess probably just getting that feedback on, it sounds shallow, but sites like Instagram, people DMing you saying, dude, this is so awesome. This is nice. This is cool. Great shot. I don't know. It's like you said, it's so easy to get in your head and, think about what could have made this better, what you could have done different. But I think once I invested in, a full frame camera, kind of upgraded from the beginner setup that I had, that I still have, you start to get reposted by some of the bigger pages like Sims and I don't know, something like locally, like Texas Fly Company, great guys. I don't know. That's a tough question.
It's not supposed to be
answer. No, I don't know really. I guess is the final answer there.
I can understand that. And then, so obviously, but anyone who's really followed you or at least known who you are as a photographer also understands that you had another business venture, right? You had Sea Level. And I kind of want to even backtrack a little further to when was Sea Level actually thought of, and how it actually, till the moment it actually became a thing. And then maybe talk a little bit about the intricacies of what it's like to work in the apparel industry and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I graduated high school in 2012, and the plan was to move to Florida. I sold it to my parents as I would live there for a year so that I could qualify for in-state tuition, and then I would start school. So I'd essentially take a year off and work, and then go to school the following year. Unfortunately, I only made it like about a month before I blew all my money. All my little amount of money that I'd saved up from mowing yards all 4 years of high school. But I had my dad's boat there, which was just a bay boat, but we ran that thing around, and all my money went to boat gas and ramen noodles. And, everyone thinks that I moved back because, everyone goes to Florida and they party and whatnot. No, I was just fishing. I just fished too much. Everyone went to bait, lures, and boat gas. So anyways, moved back to Texas, and all my friends are in college, having fun. And I'm back in my hometown, which was pretty depressing. So I was kind of just figuring out what I needed to do. And my family had previously had a screen printing business that they, my dad's side of the family's from England. They moved to Texas, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years before I was born. And they got out of that screen printing company when I was about in middle school. But I had that backbone and all that knowledge of vendors and the process and how to, get the job done. And so I kind of just went to my dad one day. I was like, hey, I need a small loan. I want to buy a printing press and start this fishing apparel company. And he was all for it. And I have since paid back that loan of $500, maybe a little late, but it was done. I made my first logo on Microsoft Paint, like any good graphic designer. Keep in mind, this is 2012. And started, ordered the first 24 shirts, which were just white short sleeve tees. They looked ugly as hell. I still have one in the attic too, probably sitting right next to that old camera. But I just started kind of very grassroots, posting on Instagram and doing trade shows here and there. And it kind of grew and grew to a point where I was able to do it full time after, 2 or 3 years. Brought on an investor, and we, at the peak of it, we had a full in-house print shop, with multiple presses and and rows of shirt aisles or racks of shirts, and over 40 retailers, and it was a great time. I mean, I wouldn't change a single thing. Did that for about 11 years before I ended up, or we ended up selling it to a company out of Australia about a year and a half ago. But no regrets whatsoever. And most of the people in my life not just talking about fishermen, but like people in my life, like people that I consider like second sets of mom and dad came from that, from meeting them at a trade show, Houston Fishing Show, or whatever it was, a retail store, whatever. So it's definitely a huge part of my life that, I know we were talking about some mutuals we had, and
yeah,
I swear like probably 95% of the people in my life came from that in one way, shape, or form.
How hard was it to actually get the company off the ground in the start?
It was hard, but I didn't know it was hard because I was so delusional. I think I was just so blind. And I was 18 at the time, so I didn't know anything about business, but I just kind of gave it everything I had because I didn't have anything else going on. I was living at my parents' house. And that was my only thing, even though I wasn't making any money early on. It has its challenges as we began to grow, as it began to grow. As it began to grow. Sorry, I've only had one beer. I guess we brought on an investor. His name's Kyle. He's a Texas country artist and great guy. Came to me at the right time, almost like a second father to me. And I ended up moving to Austin to work on. He had a piece of land out there that we were able to build a shop and kind of operate out of there. And that's when you start to run into the growing pains, of managing our list of retailers and satisfying them with our online orders. And it's just me doing the work too. Like it's a one-man show. He was busy doing his own thing. He was strictly a financial guy. So we definitely encountered some ups and downs. But we got through it.
Yeah. Who were some of the people that actually helped you, aside from Kyle? Who were some of the people that actually helped you, go from point A to point B?
Cody Moravitz, in particular, lives in Corpus. He works on a sport fisher, the Niati. I'm not sure. I think it's a Spencer. I'm not sure what it is. He's probably yelling at if he listens to this, he's yelling at his speakers right now. Since the very like day one, he was just all in with me and for no reason. Like he didn't have anything to gain. He's just that good of a guy. Like he was just all about it, wearing it. He ran some shows down there in Corpus if I couldn't make the drive down. That and this gentleman, Austin Orr, was huge in that. And me and Austin are both kind of, I think, in a similar place in life. I hope Austin's okay with me saying that. He's a little bit older than me, not by much, I don't think. Maybe 4 or 5 years, but I think he was in college or just about graduating college and just kind of living life like weather window to weather window, just fishing. Like fishing was a priority. We didn't have many responsibilities as far as bills and family and whatnot. So Austin wore our merch all the time. I think he's still wearing a hat in his profile picture, which is awesome. But those two guys were really like instrumental in just helping me spread the word because I lived, 250 miles away.
Yeah.
And I was down in Corpus all the time, almost every weekend during the peak of it. But those two guys really just helped the structure of building sea level down there and kind of putting like boots on the ground in person at a lot of trade shows down there.
And I bet there was, at one point the marketing was probably easy in a way because you had already the knowledge of using a camera and stuff like that too, right? Yeah.
And those two definitely went hand in hand. I remember our very first product shoot, I actually hired a photographer, and I remember in the middle of and he's a great photographer, but in the middle of it, I'm like, what am I doing? Like I got all this. I think it was just my own insecurity of I've never done this before. And I was young and immature and I didn't know any better, but after that shoot, I definitely did a little bit of research, figured out how to shoot t-shirts and hats and properly, and started doing it all myself. And that's kind of a whole nother like genre of photography, right? A whole nother section compared to outdoors and nature and fish photography. But yeah, did a lot of shirts at midnight in a shooting in a big light box. It's you learn a lot when you have to, when you have no other choice or any money.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely an interesting point. I think a lot of people who want to get into the creative space of this industry, and I'm not saying that I'm in it, but guys like you and other photographers like Mac, and I'm actually going to be working on a project with Josh Hudman this week, and obviously Matt Simpson. But a lot of the people who get in, I feel like have an internal doubt as to if they can create the same quality of content that they may see, being reposted everywhere on Instagram and stuff like that. And I think a lot of people don't understand that this might sound, I don't want it to sound cocky, but it's not as difficult if you're willing to put the extra effort in. And it's just,
absolutely,
it's just, don't expect things to get given to you. Like you have to want to bump into walls and like learn as you go to actually figure out how to create a premium product. And I say that haphazardly because I've never created a premium product, but I mean like to feel like you're bringing out similar pieces of content that maybe people that you idolize or stuff like that. I don't know if you kind of agree, or if you
absolutely. I mean, it's just not being scared to fail,
Yeah.
And especially as photographers, we're all our biggest critic,
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Yeah, it's just not being scared to fail, and a lot of times, I mean, we're all guilty of that.
I mean, even and this might be a terrible segue, but even when I'm cooking, like I love to cook, and one of my things is like, if it's not absolutely perfect, I hate it, and I know what I did wrong, and I want to do more. I don't want to cook it again unless I'm baking bread. I hate baking bread. It takes 2 days to do.
Oh, I'm out. I can barely. Me and cooking just don't get along very well.
Well, sea level and photography aside, you as an angler, again, you have a lot of fly rods on the wall. Some of your most, I guess, like favorite memories involving a fly rod in your hand, or you can even talk about regular fishing rods, but you on the outdoors on the water with buds and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, looking at this rod right here, that top one on the rack, that reel is actually Austin's reel. Mm-hmm. But anyways, the story behind that, I caught my first tarpon on that reel. The tarpon was about a little bit bigger than that reel, but it was a small fish. That was a baby. And that for those listening, that reel is I think it's a 12 to 14 weight. So it's a little overgunned. But anyways, we had fished all day. We were big on finding, especially back 8, 9, 10 years ago, big on finding these baby tarpon in Texas. It's just such a special thing, right? Mm-hmm. And it's such like a secretive thing. Like no one tells anyone where the baby tarpon are. You got to do the work yourself. So we dialed some in, found out where they were, fished all day. It didn't do any good, but went back at night. And to get there, it was pretty treacherous. You had to wade there through very like waist thick mud. Just some mosquitoes eating you alive, mosquitoes everywhere. And other bugs that who knows what's stinging us. But anyways, we get to the spot, we fish for a few hours, nothing. The fish are rolling, just ignoring everything that we're giving them. And finally, as we're about to leave, I get a hit on that rod. I think I broke the appropriate rod that I did have, which was a 5-weight. I think I broke it, and that's what Austin had. So I was throwing a 12 to 14 weight at these 12-inch long fish. There was some like 10 pounders in there too, but either way, we're overgunned. Anyways, caught that fish kind of at the 12th hour, and it was my first tarpon, and I'll never forget it. And it actually surprised me. And at the end of that trip, he was like, "Hey, this is yours. This is your reel." I'm like, "No, this is your reel." Like, what are you talking about? You brought this. And he was like, "No, this is your reel." And that speaks to his character too. And that it actually has a story. He actually got that from Brian Clark, which I think you know Brian Clark, right?
Yeah, I met him before I did the episode with Jim.
Yeah.
Gebhardt, yeah.
Yeah. On the Fly magazine. It belonged to Brian Clark's dad, I believe. He used to work for Ross or Rep Ross. Apologies if I'm butchering the story, but something along those lines. And it made its way to Austin and then made its way to me. So that's like my prized possession. It hasn't left that rack in like 5 years. It's got a fly tied to it. That's just for looks.
Sure.
I don't fish it because I don't want to damage it or ding it. It's in like pristine condition too. I don't want to fish it.
Does Ross not make those reels anymore?
Not that model, no.
Oh, okay.
No.
Word.
No.
That's really funny. And I don't disagree. I one of the things is it's always a bittersweet thing talking about tarpon in Texas, because the more you talk about it, the more people are interested in it, the more people actually want to do it, go look for them, and potentially ruin stuff that you will eventually find, right? Now, without naming any names, because I just don't like to, there definitely have been some people who have profited immensely off of blowing the whistle in the tarpon fishery. And I'm not talking Galveston area, I'm talking a little bit more down south.
Sure.
And that's, to me, always been one of the more frustrating things. Is I, for a minute, was a big fan of the whole Texas, like, don't say anything.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where it was like, it was agreed that you don't talk about it. Like, you don't talk about Fight Club, like, as simple as that. And it's because of one or two bad apples that it's now been blown out of proportion. And, sometimes like, I had Eric Glass for dinner the other day, and he was telling me that, guys will reach out to him and be like, hey, like, let's go catch tarpon. And it's like, it's not exactly how it works. Like, you gotta work weather windows, like,
absolutely.
Stuff like that. And I don't know, I personally myself have been trying to figure out a bunch of little other nooks and crannies where I can find them. I think this year I plan to fish a lot by myself, especially when I'm, not up here or not working other stuff. And it was one of those things where I love to fish other people, but I start to find a sort of solace in fishing alone. And I wanted to use that as a segue to ask more a little bit about photography. But you personally, do you find it more fun to photograph alone, like out in like fauna, wilderness, stuff like that, or do you prefer to have like a subject and stuff like that when you're actually composing these things?
So, talking photography, I want to be with someone else. I want someone else to be out there to be the subject I can work with, work around. Talking fishing, dude, I'm the biggest solo fisherman you'll ever meet. I mean, I do fish with a few guys, but it's I don't know, man. I mean, it helps that most of my trips are like last minute too. If I get home from work early, or if I wake up and the wind is actually calm for once. But I love fishing by myself, and it's not like a spot thing or a secretive thing. It's just more so, it's just more therapy when I don't have to not entertain someone, because that's not the right word, but it's me, myself, and I, and maybe my dog. Right?
Yeah.
Like I just, I don't know what the right word is. I'm not worrying about someone, because I do love fishing with people too, and the camaraderie that comes along with that, and I have some really great friends that I do get to spend time on the water with. But just as important are the solo trips, just to clear the mind. You don't have to worry about conversation. You don't make conversation, or you don't have to. I don't know. So it's just the best form of therapy.
I don't disagree. I mean, yeah, I don't disagree at all. One of my favorite forms of like meditation, if you will, when it's not fishing solo, is actually fly casting. Like actually like setting a tape on the floor with a 5-weight line and just like having at it. And we both already mentioned Austin a little bit. Since you've known Austin for so long, are you someone who actually enjoys to just fly cast at all, or are you just, I'm here to fish, like I'm tying flies, I'm not tying little buzz balls or anything?
Well, let's just say I need to utilize his services. I need to book a class with him. I fly cast to catch fish. I'm not necessarily in love with the casting. I should cast more. It would be a benefit to myself and my level of skill, which is not necessarily high, but I do see the therapeutic side of it compared to conventional. For example, there's definitely more of a clears the mind as I air double haul right now. I absolutely agree with that. but I'm not like gung ho about casting. I don't cast out in the grass like I should. Sorry, Austin.
No, I mean, most people really don't. I've actually had a few people reach out to me as this podcast has progressed and stuff like that. And they've told me that they've started practicing. I know Matt Sherwood's one of them. And David Pablos is another one, another buddy of mine from Austin. Just guys that like, Alex Lazinski is a kid who I've been fishing a lot recently. And he's definitely a kid who I think can be good, if he just practices. But I think that there's a lot to kind of learn in that aspect about yourself. And I find myself thinking of the same thing. The reason I brought it up is that I find myself thinking of the same things when I'm casting by myself versus when I'm just fishing by myself. And so I feel like, and I think maybe it might be different. Maybe for you, it might be like whenever you're taking pictures and stuff, or you know, maybe like those late nights when you were like running the press and stuff and you had nothing to think about stuff.
Absolutely.
Like so I think maybe it just might be different for everybody. But I always like to ask.
I get that. Yeah. I see both sides of it. I see exactly where you're coming from.
I hope so. Now that like, so you're still doing the photography. Obviously, you're not really doing the fishing photography like as a job, but you still work in photography. What other things kind of like motivate you to kind of continue this fishing path that you kind of are on, in a way, right?
Man, it's just it's all I do. It's a passion, man. Like every time I walk out my door and that salt air hits you, it's just. I mean, I couldn't live anywhere that wasn't in very close proximity to the coast. From ever since moving down here to Galveston, there's just no way I can move back to the hill country and be 4 hours away. You know, there's just no way. I don't know. Was that a tangent? What was your question? Sorry.
Basically, like what kind of motivates you to kind of, I feel like I know the answer, right? Fishing would have been the answer. Mm-hmm. But like, is there any particular part that we haven't really covered that still motivates you in one way or another to kind of, you know, be a disciple of your craft?
Well, you know, you always want to get better. You always want to better yourself on a photography level and on a fishing level. You always want to explore. You know, I love fishing new water. I don't care if we don't catch fish or not. I'd rather. Most days, I'd rather fish new water and learn something and not necessarily catch something than fish old water that I know I can pull a red or two out of. So that like always going around the next bend, fishing the next marsh, the next lake, whatever it is kind of what like fuels the next trip that I have in mind. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't disagree either. I think a lot of people in today's day and age get used to complacency. And I like that you mentioned that you still want to get better. I think one of the issues that we have in the industry is, this might sound rude, but it's a lot of mediocrity. And I don't mean it in a bad way in regards to like the content's being put out. But I think a lot of people who want to be a part of the industry or who want to make a name for themselves or, you know, do something XYZ get used to not doing more than they should or feel like they're owed something that they're not.
Absolutely. Or they do just enough to get that hero shot to put on Instagram. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the issues is you don't have people who want to learn more. You have too many people who think, oh, well, I've done everything I need to do. I can relax. And, you know, I mentioned this, I told you a story that I won't repeat here from another guy that I kind of worked with for a little bit that I felt, you know, made some dumb decisions. And I think he kind of became real complacent with what he did. With what he does now. And one of those things where it's like, despite the given opportunities, you don't take them because you don't feel like they're enough. But it's just one of those things that I don't know how to explain it.
No, I get it.
One of the things that I'm curious about, you said you're a gearhead and stuff. What are some pieces of gear in your arsenal that you think kind of really elevated your game leading up to the moment where, you know, you started having Sims and those other companies start reposting your stuff?
Well, I graduated to full frame and then I invested in, I shoot Sony. I invested in G Master lenses, which is kind of the top tier set of lenses from Sony, which was a very tough on the bank account. Still recovering from that, honestly, but it just kind of, it allows you to do some things that you may not be able to otherwise. And a lot of it is, I mean, I'm guilty of getting caught up in like the latest and the greatest in both photography and fishing, fly fishing and conventional, and boating and everything in life pretty much. But I felt like investing in you know, the top of the line lenses was kind of okay and acceptable, because that's what I do for a living, and that is the direction that I wanted, or that's where I wanted to grow that category of my life. So yeah, on the photography side, that's pretty much it. On the fishing side, I don't know. I have some expensive rods and reels and whatnot, but honestly, like all that's all just to please me, not to please the fish, you know?
Yeah.
The fish don't care. The fish don't care.
Well, you mentioned the G Master lenses were able to actually like help you do things that you maybe weren't able to do. Do you have kind of an idea of what you were referring to? Because I'm kind of interested.
Mostly low light shooting,
yeah.
like early in the morning. Being able to crank the ISO and just really like get a savable photo when it's, you know, still 5:45 a.m. and the sun is just barely cracking over the horizon. And on the flip side of that, when it's 9 o'clock and the sun's just about set, you know, in the summertime, that's pretty much it.
I mean, I guess I don't disagree. I figured it might have been something else that I may have not noticed with like RF glass. Cause again, I'm huge into Canon and I love my RF glass, but I also have friends who run Sony. I know I'm supposed to do an episode with someone else in a couple of weeks who also runs Sony, and I had some questions to ask him as well. Now, fishing, photography, all stuff aside, when you look at the longevity of the fishery, or not, actually, here's a better question. When you look at the industry, do you notice anything that you would change, or is there any issues in the industry that you wish you would change or could change?
There's a lot of like, look at me, you know, which kind of boils back to, I probably sound like an old 80-year-old man harping on this, but there's a lot of just, I feel like people out there just looking at it or doing it for the notoriety and, you know, the more the status versus the passion for fishing, passion for the game, if you will. People still taking stringer picks and gripping grins and keeping fish out of the water for way too long, and just stuff like that kind of irks me, you know. I don't know. I feel like, at least for me, I always put the fish at the top, and then photography's 2 or 3, you know, on the scale of importance. You know, like do what's best for the fish. You know, a cool photo is great, but if you have a dead tarpon because you kept it out of the water too long trying to get a hero shot, like what good is that? You know?
Yeah, that's fair. And that actually I think was a good segue into another question I wanted to ask, which is conservation oriented questions. Have you by any chance like followed like the whole like the trout regulations and the stuff with oysters and flats, stuff like that?
Man, I have a little bit, but to be honest, I stay out of a lot of that.
Yeah.
Same with like just general politics in America. I should, as an American, I probably should pay a little more attention, but I'm a simple dude, man. I will say I do support the new limits of the 3 trout. Up here in Galveston, there's a lot of opposition to it, of course, compared to down south, because I think those fish may have been affected a little more, even though Galveston, I know, was hit pretty hard regardless. That was right before I moved here. I don't know what the fishery was like here before that. So it's hard also for me to speak with certainty. You know, I'm just going off of what people that I trust have told me. At the end of the day, to sum it all up, I do believe that limits and regulations are a good thing. Even if it takes away from you and I, or the guy trying to feed his family. I just think, I don't know. No one needs, 10 trout in the morning,
I don't disagree with you at all.
Every weekend.
And to confirm what you just said, the Galveston community was the reason why it took a little bit longer to actually have regulations on trout. And I had Mark Fisher from TBWD talk a little bit about this, but you had the guys on the northern half of the coast talk about how the trout fishery wasn't affected that badly by the freeze. Right. Well, the only difference was the northern half had a lot more deeper water. And that in turn was kind of redundant to legislate a whole body of water, because you have a body of water, which is Lower Laguna Madre, which a couple years ago when Scott L. Murray put out World Class Texas Trout Tomorrow, him and TPWD found that he going through TPWD's data found that a majority of trout over 27 or 28 inches actually came south of the land cut. So there in and of itself, you have a huge population of breeder fish that are now not getting respected, if you will, or just, getting over harvested and not protected, because you have so many of these other fish, the smaller fish, the spawn ease fish that are, using deep water haunts and stuff to protect themselves from the cold and whatnot.
Yeah.
And that was kind of an issue that I never really understood. And that was one of the things that Mark and I butted heads on. But it was one of those things where it was like, regardless, the best way to put it is, regardless, it shouldn't really matter how many fish you're trying to protect, because at the end of the day, the more, the biggest issue is actually the amount of new boats that have been coming in and stuff like that. So no matter what, the fishery's been extremely pressurized. And that's just kind of one of those things where it's like, I never really saw the argument. But I don't know. I digress. It was just one of those things where it was kind of like an interesting thing. And, I had Chuck Nizer on last week, and he basically explained that the reason the GCCA was actually founded was because there was an argument from the quote unquote privatization angle. So you had a bunch of the commercial boats coming in and just over harvesting trout and redfish in Galveston Bay and obviously through South. And they were arguing that it was their legal right to do so. Technically it was, but if you look at what was going on, they were actually literally privatizing it, because they were taking complete control of it, and the real anglers weren't actually getting anything. So it was an extreme uphill battle against companies and corporations that actually resulted in what was then deemed the Redfish Wars. But when it was passed, or when it was won by the GCCA, I forgot what year, that was what actually resulted in redfish and trout becoming a game fish, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Because I never knew any of this stuff.
Yeah, it's wild to think about.
Yeah,
before our time.
Exactly, and there was a chance that this fishery would have never really been a thing. And with redfish and trout on the mind, I do want to ask, you personally, what is probably your favorite fish to chase down here now that you're in Galveston, aside from obviously baby tarpon?
Redfish. I have to say redfish. I want to say tarpon, but I haven't caught enough up here to claim that yet. Hopefully I change that this summer. Now that we got that boat up and going. But I tarpon have always been my first love. No matter where I am, whether it's Florida or Texas or the Caribbean or wherever. But that I still have to figure them out up here, the big ones, the Gulf fish. Redfish though, I can drop the boat in the lift and be on fish in 5 minutes, and I never take that for granted. It's so much fun,
I bet.
And yeah, our water's a little dirty, although we do have grass, we do have clear water if you know where to look. But you look for wakes, you look for backs, you look for tails, and it's a learning curve. It took me, I don't know. When I first moved here, I fished with a lot of people. I know I was just telling you that I'm a solo angler, but I was just like a sponge. I had to soak up all this information, right? I met a lot of great people doing so, but it's definitely a change, coming from fishing the grass flats of the Laguna to fishing, the marsh up here. I'm not going to say one's better than the other, or I have more fun doing one or the other, or I prefer one or the other.
I prefer one.
Well, yeah. I don't know. Most people do. There's beauty in both though, and I think that if you can get good at chasing Galveston redfish, you just become a better redfish angler across the map, because they're just harder to catch. You got to look for signs of fish, not just fish.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you knew this, but I want to know, did you know that Galveston Bay actually used to be the #1 commercial snook fishery?
I did.
Isn't that
which
crazy?
is crazy to think about. Crazy. I have found some snook since moving here.
Yeah.
Have not got one in the boat, but I have hooked them. So that's another on my to-do list. But it's just it takes so much time, you know. And you got if you're going out for that, you're going out for that and nothing else. And it's a bit of a drive from here. So
I mean, it's tough. The same thing for big trout and South Padre. Like you have to dedicate yourself to it. And one of the cool things that I love about more niche fisheries, especially, and you only really can target niche fisheries if you're someone who lives in the area. Because if you're a tourist, it's really hard to actually time it out perfectly or have enough days to pay a guide. Like you have to know your own stuff. And one of the things I like about it is you're basically signing yourself up to come home empty-handed every single time.
Absolutely. Seeing a fish
is a win already.
Right.
Yes.
Jumping a fish is a double win. Landing a fish,
quadruple win.
Yeah. It's and it's such like a small group of anglers that does it too, you know.
And you meet, like you can tell who's really into it, who just, you know, may have caught one on accident, stumbled on it.
Right.
And I think that's kind of cool is when you actually get to really meet the nitty gritty anglers within the community that you guys share. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask that I feel like I should have asked before is, as a photographer, I want to kind of know maybe like a handful of some of your favorite pictures that you've taken and maybe describe what it was like to take those or being in the moment. 'Cause I think it was one of my favorite questions that I asked Mac.
Yeah. The first one that comes to mind is probably a shot that I took in Exuma in the Bahamas. Was on a family trip. Me and my dad fished. Exuma is a very like remote place. Like there's not a lot of tourists or there is one resort, one sandals resort, but it's kind of like off on the side. But anyways, you fish all day and not see another person. But anyways, it was our first or second morning. We're still kind of figuring out the tides, figuring out, you know, when we need to be there for those bones to get up shallow. And we finally hit it right. I believe it was the second afternoon. My dad is a big fisherman, but not a big fly fisherman. He kind of just does it whenever it's convenient. Like there's like a huge school of reds or a big bait ball off the beach. You know, like he's just that kind of, and he's fine with me saying that. He'll admit it himself. But we turn a corner and there's just tails everywhere, bonefish. And I was like, okay, like Dad, if this is gonna happen, like here's the rod. I don't want to catch one. You need to catch one. And I got a shot of him kind of in the foreground with the tails, the school of bonefish in focus. And then he caught his first bonefish out of that school, and it was just a super cool moment. I don't think I posted that one either. Yeah, I probably should have, but I'll always have it. I'm never going to delete it. I just look back at it whenever usually when it's like a cold December day or January day, I'll look at that and it takes me back somewhere warmer. Another one kind of closer to home was my first successful trip landing a tarpon in Galveston. So with my buddy Alex and his girlfriend Gabby, and we actually had a double, me and Gabby, doubled up on big fish. Mine was about 140, and hers ended up being about 165 using the calculations. Just a massive fish, and it was total chaos. We got mine in quicker. I don't know, maybe with like 10 minutes to go on her fight. And so we quickly got mine, quick picture, let it go, and then focused on Gabby's because her fish was a lot bigger. And it still had a few jumps left in it. And, you know, they're not going to win any awards, but it was like more of like a personal accomplishment. Like, okay, we got on fish in Galveston. Alex is a hell of a tarpon fisherman. He's caught hundreds of them probably. But for me, it was like so cool seeing them where I live, you know, catching them where I live for once. And we got some shots of her fish jumping and her releasing the fish. And it was just, I'm pretty sure it was her biggest tarpon. She's got several too. So yeah, those are probably the first two that come to mind.
I feel like everybody has really cool ideas or really cool memories of shots that they take, especially in the photography world. Me personally, I don't think I could be put on the spot like that. Like it was trying to think of
because
one.
I was about to turn it around on you.
No, definitely do not. But one of my favorite things in regards to photography, and it's always fun having someone who, again, enjoys more than one of the same passions that I have, because I can have more resonation.
Yeah.
But for me, one of my favorite things is always like seeing like the stoke on someone's face when you turn the camera and you're like, look, like I got a good picture, and then like, oh my God, like send it to me, like whatever.
You can't stage that. Like, it's genuine, it's raw. That's
one of the coolest things. Like I genuinely enjoy. And it was one of those things that I never thought I would. Like I always thought I wanted to be the person on the bow the whole time. And it was actually one time that I was talking to Jaco Lucas right before I put out my first film, Madre Padres. Yeah. And, you know, I had sent him like a question or something. And basically he answered real simply. He basically summed it up to just always keep filming, or always keep shooting, something like that. And he was like, well, like if I want to do this, like I'm going to try. And one of the cool things, and I'll mention Craig Oatman here in a second, about even when you don't have a subject, and when you just like tailing redfish, or you use a cool looking great heron or dolphin or whatever, it's almost like you did catch that fish in a way.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the coolest things. And the best way that I can explain it is it might sound dumb, but to me, it's an even longer version of catch and release. Like, in a way, right?
Yeah, I get that.
And I like the story a lot that Craig Oatman mentioned on our episode, where it was, as his dad was an amazing elk hunter, and his dad towards I think maybe by the last time that they've elk hunted, I don't know, I haven't really asked him, but the story he told me was they went out to go hunt an elk, and his dad goes over the ridge, and you know, he's like looking around, and he just hears his dad go like, bang, like I could have got you. And the elk runs away. And it was knowing that he had fooled the actual animal and actually gotten it to where he had outsmarted it.
Yeah. He could have if he wanted to.
Exactly.
But he got enough satisfaction just
knowing that he had outsmarted it or something like that. To me, I think I
respect the hell out of that.
Right? Like it's one of those things where it's like I think that's where most people who don't understand catch and release would probably think that his dad was crazy.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I am a huge fan of that, because it's like a lot of those animals tend to be the genetics that we would consider trophies in the future. And I never was a big fan of killing the trophies, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. I always love that story, because it ties in the whole idea of like me not being the guy on the bow. Absolutely,
man. I'm not far from just taking the skiff out, leaving rods at home, and just having a phone or a camera.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not there yet, but I think it's in both of our futures probably.
I hope so.
Because I mean, like you said, it's like a longer version of catch and release, you know? And, aside from Tarpon, put me in a boat with a camera and someone that, you know, can cast and is casting around fish. I'm fine having the camera in my hand. I don't have to catch. Unless we're tarpon fishing.
Yeah.
But any other time, I'm just as happy or just as satisfied or fulfilled, you know, getting that shot versus just physically catching the fish. Letting someone else check that box, and I'll just be the cameraman.
Yeah, I think a lot of it also has to do with like, there's so many of the same repetitive grip and grin photos that when you can take an image, like take a still image in such a fast moving life and make it to where it's so different and it catches the eye, it catches the angler's eye, it catches you as a photographer, but as well as people who might be seeing it. I just think that's extremely special. And it's one of those things that I can see why it is fulfilling, because I know it is fulfilling. Well, for me anyways, right? But yeah, I don't know. I always think it's really cool to just see where people rely on that stuff. Because, you know, some people would be like, oh, well, you just take pictures of fish because you just don't know how to catch them.
Right.
Okay, sure, fine, fair.
I've heard that once or twice.
Well, so typically, like, so we're getting close to the hour mark. And the way I kind of like to end these is I like to ask 2 separate questions. And you can kind of go on it as long as you really want. I'm not really like, you can be short, it can be long, it doesn't matter. The first question is, again, looking back at everything that you've done, which, I mean, you know, I think it's been a lot. You know, I don't think anybody can start an apparel company and then, you know, get good at photography and then also fish all in one and maintain it all in the same industry. But going back and looking at everything you've done, is there anything that you wish you would have done differently? Or would you have probably done it all the same, like taken all the bumps in the road the same? stuff like that. And the reason I ask is because, there might be some people who may be listening. They're also planning to start their own apparel company, and they'd be like, oh, well, maybe I should do XYZ first, stuff like that.
As a whole, I wouldn't change anything because I love my life and where I am right now. But the only thing that I would adjust, maybe is a better way to put it, is just having a little more, or not being scared to fail about some things, being a little more open to taking risks when I could, and when I still can, but you know what I mean? Like when you're young and dumb and stupid, and you don't have any big bills or necessarily hard responsibilities, that is the time to like just try any and everything, Who gives a damn if you fail?
I don't disagree.
Like, you can fail right now. Don't wait until you're 40, 50. I'm only 30 for the record. When you're a little more established and you have a mortgage and kids and, a wife, things just get a little bit harder at that point. I imagine. I don't know. I don't have kids, but I have a dog, which is half of a kid. But I think I was definitely a little reserved throughout the course of sea level, and over time, toward the end, toward the latter half, I got away from that and started kind of being less reserved and a little more open to change and risks and whatnot and gambles. But I could have probably gotten there a lot quicker had I started that earlier. You know what I mean? From the get-go.
Absolutely.
But, part of that's just life. You live and you learn.
No, I get you. And I think it might actually give me a segue to another question, but talking about the ability to fail, for you, as an individual, Brandon Fox, is there any projects that you have maybe planned for the future? You don't have to tell me what they are, but just like if you do, or anything that you've been like, slowly working towards?
I don't know if you call it a project, but I want to get to a place where I can travel and do multiple trips a year instead of just one or two, to check off some boxes, places I want to go fish that are bucket list places for me. That's really it. I live a pretty simple life. There's not much to it. But yeah, it's just always kind of bettering yourself and putting out better content, even if I'm the only one looking at it. Just in all facets of life, just getting better, moving forward.
It seems like, I feel like if you like decide to like start getting back into, or not getting back, starting to sell images in the fishing world, it feels like that could be a good a good vessel for you to actually pursue that project, if you will.
Absolutely.
Because I think a lot of people still will like want people to come and actually have the gear and skill to actually make them, it might sound bad, but look better on when they come back from the trip and they caught 2 fish, but they look like they caught 15.
Right. We easily done.
Movie magic.
I've never done that. Nope, not me.
All right. Well, the last question I like to ask, if you imagine like you're talking to the next generation, kids who are 12, 14, 16, up until maybe the age you were when you started sea level, aside from obviously the nitty gritty response that you just gave, what is kind of like some advice that you would give them in turn for looking for a future in like a fishing career in a way, or just in general, like a life advice type deal?
Probably just don't be selfish, and have respect for the people around you and the resource, the water, the fish. It's easy to be young and dumb. I was, you probably were, I don't know, but still, I definitely was. It's just, giving a damn, I guess is the best way to sum it up. Don't be cutting off people's drifts. Don't be burning shorelines. Don't be keeping a tarpon out of the water for 5 minutes to get a good hero shot. Don't drag it up on the rocks. And don't be afraid to take risks.
I like that. No, I don't disagree with anything you said, man. Again, like, you wanting to be a part of this has been awesome. Like, when I first reached out to you and you told me you'd already heard an episode, that to me was a crazy moment. I was but it means a lot to me that you find it worth your while to be a part of this. And then obviously the stuff that I showed you off camera that I would really want to also be, I really want you to also be a part of. But with that being said, is there anything else you want to have said?
No, man. I mean, this was an honor. Like I said,
for me, bro.
I don't know about that. I've been a fan, and a podcast is only as good as its moderator.
Fair.
Right.
I mean, I guess with the guests,
So-
I think it make it a big deal.
Well, agree to disagree. But you do a great job with this. I've heard almost all of them. I still have a few, and I'm not lying. You can look through my phone. So I'll be checking those off here in the next week or two as I drive around town. But yeah, I'm a fan and will be.
Cool, bro. All right, well, let's get out of here.
All right.